Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today for Precision Digital's introduction to the new ConsoliDator Plus. This display and control device is great for alarming multiple 4 to 20 milliamp inputs and pulse inputs. We're going to take a close look at this here today and introduce you to all the great new features and improvements in this product line. Before I go ahead and jump into that, however, I got a couple of bookkeeping items I'd like to go over. First, you may have noticed that you are all in listen-only mode. With the number of people on today's webinar, it just wouldn't be practical to have everyone having open phone lines. However, if you'd like to comment to me or raise some questions, I would go ahead and ask you to type those questions into the chat menu you've got on your screen. It's probably in the lower left. If you want to go ahead and send me questions throughout the course of the webinar or make other comments, I'll be happy to address some of those questions as we go through the webinar. Others that may be too complicated to cover here today, we'll get back to you with answers on after the webinar. The number one question that we get is, will this webinar be recorded, or can I get the slides? And the answer to both of those is yes. We'll be sending out an email about the middle of next week that will have a recording of today's webinar as well as the slides that you're going to see here today. So if you want to share those out with other people at your company, your customers, etc., you can go ahead and do that. The last thing I've got to mention before we dive in is that there is a survey at the end of the webinar. It's short. It shouldn't take you more than a minute, probably much less. And we'd sure appreciate it if you'd fill that out. That lets us know how the webinar was today and give us some ideas on what else you might like to see for webinars from Precision Digital. So with that, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Joe Ryan. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing for Precision Digital. And in today's webinar, what I'm hoping that you'll have for takeaways is an understanding of the ConsoliDator Plus key features, its functionality, its price ranges. I'd like us to review the ConsoliDator Plus inputs and outputs, its relays and communication protocols, so you have a good understanding of what kind of features are packed into this. And we're going to briefly talk about some common applications, look at its accessories, and our new setup and calibration services for it as well. So by the time we're done here today, you should have a pretty good understanding of the basics of this product line and how you may be able to use it. Now, to help me tailor today's conversation, I have a question for you, which is, what's the industry you're involved in? Are you one of our industrial distributors, or perhaps you're an end user working in one of these industries? If you're going to go ahead and click on Other, then I just ask you to type that response into me and let me know what that other may be so we can add it to the list or have a sense of what it is you're doing there. And it looks like the vast majority of you are industrial distributors of ours, so thank you for joining us here today. Those of you who are not, don't worry too much about it. We're just going to be covering this product line. There's nothing too distributor specific. I may make a few comments about that, but please feel free to hang on board. You're not going to be bored by conversations we have with this many distributors in the audience. The first thing I think is important to understand about this product is it was designed by Precision Digital engineers. This is not a buyout or a private label. This is not something you're going to find anywhere else. We have an in-house engineering team that works maybe 100 feet from where I'm sitting now. And these are the three engineers who really drove this project. Oro Bavar, our principal engineer, James Venable, our senior embedded software engineer, and Jose Umana, our senior product engineer. Now, those of you who are distributors, you may have actually talked to a couple of these folks in the past because they do get involved in sometimes some complex troubleshooting and such. I think it's important to know that this is a product that was designed right here at Precision Digital to meet all of our criteria as far as being a feature-packed, rugged, long-lasting product. And with that, let's take a look at some of these key features. I'll say right off the bat, some of you may be familiar with our old ConsoliDator line, the PD940s, PD980s. And if you are, this really is a leap forward in design. So for example, right off the bat, you'll see this is a NEMA 4X product, whether it's its panel mount or its enclosure-based field mount variety. However, you still got that numeric and bargraph color display. You don't see any bar graphs in this particular window here, but we'll see plenty of screens later that show you that bar graph. It can have up to 20 screens with up to 8 PVs each. This image you see here on the display, that is a screen. And you'll notice there's some left and right arrows here. that allows you to change between different screens, and those screens can show you a huge variety of information. Again, we'll dive into that a little more later. And just to cover all the bases here, by a PV, I mean a process variable. So for example, in this image, by a process variable, I mean the sump height. But that could be a flow rate. It could be a weight. It could be a total. It could be strain. It could be temperature. You name it. Really, any process variable you're trying to measure. You can get isolated 4 to 20 milliamp outputs on this. And I think it's important to drive home the fact that those are isolated, because we also have isolated 24-volt power supplies for all of your analog inputs and your outputs. And you'll notice it's a modular design as well, which we'll take a look at when we see the back of the unit. That'll really become clear. As far as communication goes, we've got RS-485 for Modbus communication standard. So there's an Ethernet TCP IP option available. So if you want to use Modbus via Ethernet, you can certainly do that as an option. You've got math functions to connect the various inputs together in order to get a variable that you calculate. It's good down to -40. So those of you who may be from Canada or parts north, this is going to be a great option for you, because you can put it in the field box, mount it outdoors, and you're good to go. We do take pulse analog inputs for flow rates, and you can get total and grand total capability from those, either pulse or analog. If you're more in a level applications, you can do pump alternation control or simple on-off control with it. As you would expect, we've got ConsoliDator Plus configuration software to make setup easier. And as this is a precision digital design product, there is a 3-year warranty on this, because, well, we think you're going to get well more than 3 years on it, but putting a 3-year warranty shows that, we really do believe in the quality of this product. So I know there's a lot of bullets there, but hopefully you see the advantages in all of those. As far as pricing goes, there's really a wide range of prices, because it depends on the combination of features you're getting. You'll notice in this chart we break it down by how many pulse inputs, 4 to 20 milliamp inputs, 4 to 20 milliamp outputs, and relays are on the product. So if you just want a 4-input display for 4 to 20 milliamp signals, then you can get our panel mount version of this product for just over $2,000. Now, if you decide that you want 8 pulse inputs, 8 4 to 20 milliamp inputs, 10 4 to 20 milliamp outputs, and 5 relays to run those, or to control those, well, now you're talking something that's more in the $4,500 range. In fact, you can even get 28 inputs on this. Let's say, for example, you just want to bring 28 4 to 20 milliamp inputs into the device and then pull that data out via Modbus to a PLC or SCADA system. Well, now you're talking just over $5,000. So you really have a range from $2,000 to $5,000, all depending on your combination of inputs and outputs. For those of you familiar with the old ConsoliDator, you might, for example, look to this PD9000GP 8AI 10AO 10RY, meaning it comes with 8 4 to 20 milliamp inputs, 10 4 to 20 milliamp outputs, so each one of those has its own isolated 4 to 20 out, and you've got 10 relays on there to control based on those inputs. A few things from the code notes down below. There is a field mount and a panel mount. The field mount adds $175 to the price, but it puts it inside of a custom NEMA 4X box. And as you'll see in a moment, it's more than just an enclosure with the panel mount in it. It really is its own standalone complete product. And it's $500 to add the Ethernet option onto any one of these. If your first thought is, well, there's a lot of options here, but what if I want something that isn't represented here? For example, what if I want something that has 4 4 to 20 milliamp inputs, but I only want 5 relays? Can I get that? Well, the answer is you can. For a $250 price adder, because there's work to do on our end to build these and integrate it into our system, we can make custom configurations of this, custom ins and outs. Now, there's a lot of stock ones available, so it may not make sense if you're only going to be looking to buy one, but if that was your first thought was, well, can I get a custom one? The answer is certainly yes. Let's talk about the display. After all, that is the thing that someone's going to look at the most on this product. And so here are some of our display features. First of all, this is a NEMA 4X front, once again. So even though you've got this color LCD on there, it is still NEMA 4X sealed, and this is sunlight readable. If you're worried about glare from those times of day where we've really got horizontal sun coming right at this thing. We do offer a sunshade, but as far as outdoor use, generally you're going to be okay because it is a sunlight readable display. You can display 1 to 8 of those process variables on one screen with or without bar graphs. We saw earlier we didn't have the bar graphs. You'll note here we've enabled those. So here I've got my 8 bar graphs, and each one of those is going to correspond to one of these 8 inputs. Now, one of the first things you'll likely notice here is that you have commas available in these numbers, which is a huge advantage over most other kinds of displays. Because you can opt to have the comma there if you want, you can now easily tell that this is 5,249.1 gallons. That becomes more difficult when you don't have commas. For example, if you look at these two numbers, one just intuitively jumps off the screen. The comma lets you know what the number is. The other one, you got to sort of stare at it for a second. With totals, that becomes a much bigger deal. When you have something in the millions totalizing, having that comma there is a lifesaver, especially if you've got decimals, to really understand what's happening. Every one of these channels has a channel number, has a tag. You've got units displayed on there, although in this case they're all gallons. And all of that and the bar graphs display on our color 5.7-inch screen. So even though I've got a lot of information here, it's a pretty sizable display. You can very easily read all of that. The last thing I'm going to note here is that your alarms set up for these channels show up on the display. In the case of not having an alarm, you're going to notice, or not having an alarm that's active, you're going to notice I have this yellow line going across the bar graph. And that indicates where my alarm is. So I know that that's my alarm point. Now, if my alarm is triggered like it has here on channel 4, that alarm bar turns red to indicate that the alarm's on. And I probably have a dead band in there, meaning the gap between where the alarm turns on and where the alarm turns off. So when this rises up, it's going to hit that threshold. It's going to turn that bar red. And when it's coming back down, because presumably I've turned on a pump or made some kind of change to address that alarm, as it's coming back down, you've got this bar on the left of that that shows you where the alarm is going to turn off. So it's not going to actually turn off again until I get to the bottom of that red bar. So not only do I have an indication that there is an alarm, but I've got something that's going to tell me when my alarm is going to reset. Here's some other display possibilities, configurations you can do with your screen. This is a single channel detail screen. And so here I've got my channel number, my label for that channel, my units, the actual number, in this case with commas. But then I've got more detailed information for that channel. Not just the bar graph like I have on the front, but I've got the analog input that that channel is being taken from and its actual milliamp value. In this case, I'm tracking the time that I've had that in this case, a pump on that's running this channel. I can do that based on some digital inputs that may all tie into this. And I've got a high alarm here, and it's going to tell me the status of that alarm. So if I want to dive in and see some information on this specific channel, I can go ahead and do that. I can build that screen. Another screen option would be a pump control screen. In a case like this, where I'm doing a little level control. Well, now I've got my bar graph. I've got my label. Of course, the screen has a title, so I know I'm looking at duplex pump controller here. I can see that I've got it configured for units in feet and inches here, so I've got 9 feet, 5 inches. And then I've got 2 pumps that are set up to do pump control, pump 1 and pump 2, where I track the runtime and the cycle count for each one of those pumps. And if any of those are on, which is going to happen when I reach that bar right there, if any of those are on, these would display as on. If I have an alarm here, I can see sump 1 level OK, because I can name alarms. This doesn't just say alarm 3 on off. You can actually have it say, look, I want this alarm to be called sump 1 level OK. No one has any question what that means. My sump level is not OK. This will go from yes, and it will change to no. Now I've got a rate and total screen over here measuring effluent flow. And I've got the flow rate and the flow total on here, both labeled. I've got my units, gallons per minute and gallons. This is really where that comma comes into play, right? I can look at that number, and I can really tell that I've got a million there. If you had another couple of decimal places on here and you didn't have those commas, boy, it would be nearly impossible to figure out what that number is quickly and just walk by, look at it, and know what's happening. And you can have up to a 15-digit total on that flow total. So you can totalize a lot of information on here. This is also really a convenient time for me to point out these soft keys at the bottom that you may have noticed. You see on each one of these screens, those soft keys are different. Those correspond to the mechanical, rugged, rubberized push buttons that are on the front. And in each case, you can really set them up to be whatever you want on the screen. So here I've got all arrows to navigate around the menus. Over here, I've got acknowledgments and resets for my alarms and my pumps. Whereas on this other screen, I've got the ability to turn the scanning feature on and off if I want to stop and pause at one of the screens it's scanning through. I can acknowledge all my alarms from the screen as well. Or I can force it to go look at other screens. So you can do some modification to the soft key so you really get the features you want on that screen. Now, before I move on, I will address one of the questions that came up that really has to do with these units I've been talking about. It comes from Tim, and he asks, what about custom engineering units, or ones being used by our customers? Say they want a conductivity measurement, or they want a pH measurement. Well, all of these units are fully customizable. So we're showing you some sort of basic ones a lot of people will use, like gallons or feet and inches. But you can absolutely scale this for any custom unit you've got. Some of those units are going to be in there and already be selectable. There is a wide range of units you can just scroll through and select based on what the measurement is. You can select, for example, I'm looking at a volume measurement and I want it to be in liters. But if you decide you want it in bottles, some custom number that we would know about, you can certainly do that as well. So you're not limited in your unit selection here. Now, talking a bit about the actual mechanics of this device, you'll notice there is a field mount and a panel mount. The field mount is more than just the panel mount in the box. I know that that basic frame on the front looks very similar, but it is not just the panel mount put inside of an enclosure. This is a completely different build-up with different parts that actually integrate the ConsoliDator Plus into this field mount unit. So this is a NEMA 4X sealed box. You can tell that it's got a hinge on it on one side so that you don't have to deal with a floating front when you pull some screws out. In fact, you don't need any screws at all because there's a latch on it which can be secured by a lock, zip tie, lead seal, etc. You've got built-in mounting flanges on the top and bottom so that you can wall mount it or pipe mount it. And it is a deep box. If you look over here on the side, you get some sense of how deep the panel mount version of this is. And all the rest of the room in the back of that box is there for you to put conduit connections, back panels, which we offer as an accessory, barriers, thin rail mounted equipment, anything else you want to put inside that enclosure. Now the panel mount looks very similar. However, as I just mentioned, there's a lot of room in the back of the field mount because it is a shallow depth panel mount. You don't need a lot of room behind your panel to mount this. And we have a forgiving panel cutout. And by that I mean, you'll notice the bezel, much like on our panel meters, is oversized. So if you're cutting these panels out, you don't have to be exact in order to keep your NEMA 4X seal. If you screw up by 1/8 of an inch, you're going to be perfectly fine. You're not going to have to scrap that panel or make some kind of an adapter plate for it. We find that people who deal with these a lot really love that forgiving panel cutout, so we made sure we included it on this product as well. Now, this shot, which is of the inside of the panel mount version, you'll notice the latch here and the inside of the box. This shot is nice because it shows the configuration of the product, or how this product comes together, and how it's really built to be modular. You see, if you look on that picture on the right, you're going to see that there's all kinds of different connections you can have for this product. And some of those are standard, which is basically everything you see over here on the right. Those come with the product. Ethernet is an option, but everything else is going to come standard. And then you've got individual slots, which is these horizontal connections. And those slots can be built up to be analog inputs, analog outputs, pulse inputs, or relays. And so that's why you have the ability to have all these different configurations of products. If you want to get 28 4 to 20 milliamp isolated inputs, you can do that. We just fill up all those slots with analog input cards. same way, you can have 28 pulse inputs. You can have up to 25 10-amp Form C relays with 8 analog or pulse inputs. So in that kind of a case, we'd fill up 5 of these slots with relays and 2 of these slots with input cards. And we've got 5 digital inputs, 4 digital outputs, and RS-485 that you can use for Modbus communications. That all comes standard on every ConsoliDator Plus. Those just come with it, whether you get all of the inputs or none of the inputs. And those are those connectors that you're going to see over there on your right. So that's why you've got such a variety in this product line and all the different types of configurations you can get. And as I'm sure some of you are wondering, that's also why you're able to add cards in the field, or if there is a problem, if one of these cards gets burned up, you can just pull that card out, you send it in to us, and we can swap you in a new card. It really makes maintenance on this and the expansion capability of it quite nice. I've made a big deal about mentioning power supplies and isolation. That is critical for this product line. Especially those of you who are familiar with our older ConsoliDator products will understand why this is such a big advantage. Each 4 to 20 milliamp input has its own 24-volt isolated power supply to power the transmitter. So in the simplest case, where you have a 2-wire level transmitter, let's say, I've got, these 3 pins are present on every analog input. I've got an isolated 24-volt supply on every single one of those inputs. So I just connect 2 wires going from my input to my transmitter, and that powers the transmitter and the 4 to 20 milliamp loop and brings it back into the consolidator. So it's literally just 2 wires to your 2-wire transmitter, and you're done. No external power supplies needed, and it's completely isolated. If this was a 4-wire transmitter, well, then all I've got to do is, or let's say it's a 3-wire transmitter, all I have to do is bring my 24 volts over into the power input for my 3-wire transmitter. And if it's a 4-wire transmitter, then all I have to do is just bring my ground over to that as well. So you've got essentially an external power supply for every transmitter you connect to this, standard with every input. And in total, the consolidator can provide up to 1,600 milliamps of power, or 1,600 milliamps of current. So if you've got 28 inputs, and those 28 inputs all go to 2-wire transmitters that at most are going to be drawing 20 milliamps, that's no problem. If you've got 4-wire transmitters, and each one of those transmitters is going to draw, let's say, 200 milliamps of power, well, I can still have 8 of those without having to need an external power supply. Now, we also provide an isolated 24-volt power supply on every output loop. So along the same lines, you can set it up as easily as you see here. I've just got a powered 4 to 20 milliamp output coming out, and I bring that into whatever I want to be reading that 4 to 20, a panel meter, a PLC, an HMI, you name it. Off to the control room, usually it goes. So all those isolated power supplies are a great feature to have in this. They save you from having to build up third-party external power supplies. They save you from having to solve power supply problems when you're setting this up. And because the Consolidator Plus can take either high voltage or low voltage, it comes with the ability to take both on every one. You really don't need to worry about how the customer's going to power anything. So long as they have some kind of power there that can turn this on, which could be 120 volts, it could be 24 volts DC. So if they have something that's going to turn this Consolidator Plus on, then you've now got all the power supplies you need. Similarly, let's talk a little bit about the communications. So I mentioned that Ethernet is an option. That gets you Ethernet, Modbus, TCP/IP protocol. So I can use a Modbus PLC, Modbus control system to talk to this on my local area network. If I get the IT guys involved, I can talk to this from anywhere in the world. I've set that up myself. You have to worry about passing through firewalls and such to do that, but the product is enabled and ready to do it. You get a micro USB port standard, which is used for connecting with your Consolidator Plus configuration software. I'm sure everybody here has got micro USB cables somewhere in the drawers of their desk or glove box of their car. So we use something that's very, very common. And for general Modbus connectivity, if you don't need Ethernet, we offer RS-485, which is standard on all products. And it lets you either pull data out of this unit or write data to it. You could use this, for example, as a field display for a Modbus system that just needs a way to display data. Or you could be bringing in 4 to 20 milliamps or pulse values and then pulling those values out of it into your Modbus system. I mentioned the ConsoliDator Plus configuration software. That is a free download, but you configure your inputs, outputs, alarms, and timers. You can save it, which is useful both for step and repeats, where you're going to have more of these consolidators doing the exact same thing, but also as a way to restore to your default. If someone has messed with this in the field and it's not working quite right, you can have that on file and just re-download the program into it. And again, you connect to that via that standard micro USB cable. So a question for you, how familiar are you with the previous generation of ConsoliDator products? Those old PD940 and 980 units. Is that something that you're really familiar with? We should talk a little bit about how this compares, or are you not familiar with it at all, and it's not worth spending much time on? And based on these results, it seems like a lot of you are somewhat familiar with it. You know it existed. There's even a couple of experts out there, so glad to have those on the line. So why don't we take a look and see how it compares to that previous generation. We'll just spend one slide on this, so it won't be too long. So just looking at it, you can see the difference between the ConsoliDator Plus and those older ConsoliDator models. Now we're NEMA 4X. We offer the field enclosure, et cetera. Those other ones did not. You can see the exposed connectors. And it's generally just capable of a lot more. You've got up to 28 isolated inputs versus a limited number of non-isolated inputs. You've got up to 25 isolated outputs versus a limited number of 420 milliamp outputs. There's always a problem for people who wanted to have 8 inputs but could only get 4 outputs. Well, now you can have an output for every input. You've got a lot more pulse input capability. Those of you who want to bring flow meters into this or encoders. You've got digital inputs, and not only do you have digital outputs, but you've got more capability with those digital inputs. They're no longer just used for external push buttons. You've got the ability to be a better Modbus display for those of you who want to write Modbus data to this and have it be the front of your Modbus system. A lot more power supply capability. As opposed to just having a 12-volt supply that wasn't isolated that you had to use for everything and could cause all kinds of loop isolation problems. Now you've got a 24-volt supply isolated for each analog input and output. And that is a huge improvement for those of you who have worked with the old one. You get up to 25 10-amp relays as opposed to be limited to 9. You can do pump control now, which is great for those level applications. And you've got a color sunlight readable LCD on there. Another huge improvement. We are NEMA 4. The old one was NEMA 1. You've got the option for that field mount version of it. And now you've got RS-485 versus 232, which is a lot easier to use. And you've got that Ethernet option that people have been looking for in this line for a long time. We've got a 3-year warranty on it because it's just a better, higher quality product. And now you get down to -40. So again, those of you up in Canada or other parts up north, that is a big difference over 0. So in just about every way, this is a considerable improvement. And if you've had some experience with the old consolidators, I highly recommend you try this one. Heck, go out and show folks who have the old consolidator the new one. They may like it well enough just to replace them. We have a few accessories available for the line to help you complete your solution. There's a mounting plate that goes on the back of that NEMA 4X box, letting you mount things like external relays, power supplies if you do need them, barriers, etc. We've got a sun hood. You know, we say this is a sunlight readable product, but it is a glass display, and so there are going to be times, well, I believe there might be a polycarbonate coating on it, but the point is that it is a somewhat shiny front. And so if you are in an area where you get a lot of that horizontal sun that's going to come down and really shine on this and make it difficult to read with the glare, you can get a sun hood on it to help reduce that, though most of you probably will not need it. We've got light and horn options that allow you to get a real loud audible alarm on here at 85 decibels and have one or multicolor lights on top so that you can really grab some attention. And we've got a 2-inch pipe mount kit. If you want us to provide the U-bolts and nuts and such to be able to pipe mount the field mount box, we're happy to do that. We also offer some services related to it. If you want to get calibration certificates for either 1224 up to 36 inputs and outputs. We can do that. And we can even provide it if you want it with the individual data points on there, all depending on what your facility requires. We'll even do your setup if you want to talk to us and walk us through what you want it to do. We'll program it up for you, so when you get it out of the box, it's ready just to be wired and go. Some common applications where the ConsoliDator Plus is looking to do very well, and we've already seen some success, are obviously tank height measurement. That was probably the #1 application for the older generation of ConsoliDator, and we think it's going to be the #1 application for the ConsoliDator Plus. Sump level monitoring has also been very popular. We have pump alternation control capability, something Precision Digital is known for with a lot of people who deal a lot with pumps, is the fact that we have that pump alternation control. We have it in lines like our Trident and our ProView, and now you can get it in the ConsoliDator Plus as well. Flow meter rate and total, where you want to see your flow rate and your total from either pulse or 4 to 20 milliamp input signals coming from your flow meters. And we'll, by the way, remember, power the flow meters, which is quite convenient. Open channel flow is a nice one, where you want to use your level transmitters to read flow rates. Again, we'll power up that transmitter, we'll bring it in, and we'll even do the math for you, so long as you've got the exponent used with your Weir flume. And direct Modbus PV inputs, where you want to write the ConsoliDator Plus as a slave, so you have to write the data to the ConsoliDator Plus. But if you've got a PLC system, you've got a SCADA system with a bunch of Modbus data there, and boy, wouldn't it be handy to have something in the field displaying that data nicely. Well, this is a great way to just write that data to the ConsoliDator Plus and not have to custom program up HMIs. So here's an example of what it might look like to use the ConsoliDator Plus in a level control application, in this case for sumps. So looking at the consolidator itself, I know it's a little small, but you can see here I've got my 6 sumps set up, each one with a bar graph and a label for its own, for each individual sump over there on the right. And then I've got all 4 to 20 milliamp inputs from the level transmitters isolated and powered by the ConsoliDator Plus. So I've just got power coming in here, and that could be 24 volts, that could be 120, that could be 240, whatever happens to be available. I've got 2 lines of power coming into this. And then it powers up all of those signals. So all of these transmitters and all of these sumps are all being powered by their own isolated 24-volt power supply, and that signal is coming back into the consolidator. In this case, I've got 10 Form C relays. I'm sorry, I have 24 10-amp Form C relays, so that each one of these sumps has 2 pumps, which are using pump alternation, and a high and low level alarm. So I've got 6 sumps. Each sump's going to be using 4 relays, which means I'm going to need 24 relays just for that, which I can get. I've got 25 relays, so I'm using 1 relay to send a signal to a central monitoring station whenever any of the sumps go into a high alarm. So I've got one of these relays set up so it's looking at all of those inputs, and whenever any of those reaches the alarm state, that relay is going to send a signal off to the control station, or to the monitoring station. So I'm actually using all 25 of my relays here. I'm using 6 of my 8 4 to 20 milliamp inputs, and I'm using the power supplies on each of those 6 to run those transmitters. So this is really a single product that with no real additional accessories, no external power supplies, is now going to run my 6 sumps and my 25 relays, giving you pump alternation, a signal back to the control room, and alarming. A couple of other things to remember about the consolidator. So you can display multiple inputs on one screen, or just one input in detail on one screen. You get to build those screens to be whatever you want them to be. You've got isolated 4 to 20 milliamp impulse inputs. You've got relays and 4 to 20 milliamp outputs for your primary control. You've got pump alternation control. We power up your transmitters. And you've now got that Ethernet option available. Those are really the key things you want to remember when coming across applications where the Consolidator Plus can help. quick note for all those distributors in the audience, we now have an actual size consolidator poster. This is a poster size because this consolidator is actual size. So you can show this to your customers, and it's going to show that almost 11 inches by 11 inches that is the size of this consolidator. It shows you a preview of all the different screens, much like what we looked at here today. And it makes a great handout, really, to make the point of this product. And I'll mention on the back of this poster is essentially all the information you find in the data sheet, everything from model numbers to that sump pump control application we just looked at, to other kinds of features and details. We are happy to send as many of these out to you as you would like, so long as you're going to be handing them out. All you need to do is let me know either in the chat or in the survey, or drop me an email or send me a call after the presentation. So I've got one more question for you before we take a couple of questions here, which is, would you like us to contact you or your office for additional training? Did you like what you saw here today? Have some questions? Really want to go over it in depth? If so, then go ahead and just let me know here, and we'll have somebody reach out to you and talk about how we can get you more familiar with the ConsoliDator Plus. One more second. I still got some answers coming in. All right. So let me take a couple of the questions that are built up here. First, I've got Dan, who is asking, what size is the panel cutout for this product? Is it the same as the old consolidators? So as I've mentioned before, this is available as a panel mount or a field mount product. The panel mount itself, the actual panel space it takes up, is about 11 inches by 11 inches. It's like 10.8 by 10.8. The panel cutout is 10 by 10. So the cutout you'd make in a panel is 10 inches by 10 inches. That is larger than the previous version of the consolidator, so it's not a drop-in replacement. But all you have to do is cut that cutout a little larger if you wanted to replace it. You wouldn't have to get any kind of like an adapter plate or anything like that. I've got Pete, who asked if data logging is part of the product or coming out in future releases, maybe something with the USB slot. We do have a USB slot on the back right now. That's just a micro USB used for programming. I don't have that right now in the product, but if you are interested in USB stick data logging, I would keep your eyes peeled to our emails and such. I strongly suspect that sometime in the early part of next year, perhaps Q1 if I had to guess, you might see some additional features rolled out on this product, and that might be one of them. So I can make no promises about the date for that, but if that's what you're looking for, I think you'll be happy. You just need to give us a couple of months to get that feature enabled and available. Mike has asked, is there a library of icons that can be used to build a screen? And the answer to that one is that there is not. You can choose the information you want on these screens. So you can have units, you cannot have units, you can have your PVs, you can have your milliamp inputs or your timers and your alarms, you can have bar graphs or no bar graphs, you can change what you want the buttons to be. But this product basically straddles the line between simple panel meters and HMIs and PLCs. And one of the things we did to make it easier to set this up, so someone doesn't feel like they're actually programming it like you might have to program a PLC or an HMI, is once you enable those features, we display them in the way we want them displayed. So you can't say, well, I'd really like to have a different looking tank over here, or I want to have a little pump icon next to where it says pump. It's not customizable to that level, because we want you to be able to just add some PVs, add some channels into these screens, check a checkbox or two saying, yeah, give me a bar graph. Oh, hey, yeah, why don't you put up the units on there? And just have it be a lot simpler than the kinds of devices you get where you get those custom icons. So the answer to that one is no, but I think that when you have to program this, you're going to appreciate that simplicity and the fact that we make it really easy for anyone to set this up. Pete has also asked, can one PV be sent out on 2 analog channels? And the answer is absolutely. Each one of those analog outputs is customizable to really direct itself to almost any kind of input or piece of information in the device. So you could certainly have multiple analog outputs coming from one analog input and essentially use it as a splitter. That's the kind of thing you have in mind. Jay asked about FM approval. It is not FM approved. Much like the USB I mentioned earlier, we are working on some improvements to this. One of those is that we are looking to get it Class 1 Div 2 approved. It's out being examined for that right now. It's at agencies. I can't tell you what that time frame looks like exactly, because any of you familiar with that know that that's sort of a fool's errand. But it is something we're looking at. In the ideal world, we will hopefully soon have a Div 2 version of this product, which would be great for connecting up to those Div 1 transmitters. Dan had asked, is the Modbus RTU, the RS-485, mutually exclusive with the Ethernet capability, or can you use both of them in the same box, and so you've got a choice of which one to use? If you get the option with Ethernet, you still have your RS-485. You are probably not going to be communicating to both at the same time, so it's not like it's two separate Modbus systems. But if you have both of them, you can choose which one you're going to use to talk to the ConsoliDator Plus. Dan was also asking what's the realistic working depth from the mounting subplate to the back of the door component. So just to be clear here, what we're talking about is if you've got that panel mount version and you want to put some other products in the back of the box, what kind of room do you have back there to work? And so that would be your space kind of from the back of this box to, if I kind of imagine where the panel mount back rear would be, it'd be kind of the space in that gap. And the answer is you're going to have about 2.5 inches. That should be enough for you to bring in any conduit you want to bring in. Have plenty of room to put in the nuts and such that will hold in your conduit entries, as well as some space to put other equipment back there if you'd like. And there is a little space around it as well. As you can see here, there's a gap around that electronics housing for the ConsoliDator Plus. If you had something particularly tall, you could probably mount it on the side. One thing I'll point out while I'm on the screen I didn't mention earlier, by the way, is you'll notice there's little dots on these flat surfaces of the NEMA 4X box. Those are starter holes for you to drill your own entry points. So if you decide you want to have a whole bunch of conduits coming into this, but they've all got to be on the sides or the top, we provide you a nice flat mounting surface for those conduit entries, and we give you some starter holes just to make it easier for you to install this thing. We put a lot of thought into how you're going to install it, what that experience is going to be like. That's how we ended up with hinges and latches in those starter holes and integrating the mounting flanges. I think anyone who installs that field mount box is going to be really happy with that experience. And so going back to your answer, Dan, so you'll have about 2.5 inches behind the plugs before you hit the plate in the back. Chuck has asked about language flexibility. And unfortunately, right now, this is only available in English. There are currently no plans to change that, but of course, if you've got a need, feel free to let us know and we can talk. And lastly, I have a question from Jacques about CSA approval for general purpose. We will have that very soon. You'll notice there's not currently any marks on this product from agencies, but they're on their way. So if you're up there in Canada, we have certainly not forgotten about you. And we will soon have CSA general purpose use available on this product. There are a few more questions from you out there. Some of those are just too complicated for me to get into answers here without boring everybody. So I appreciate you giving us a chance to get back to you after the webinar. I have had your attention for about 45 minutes, and I greatly appreciate you all sticking with me. I think this is an awesome new product that I hope you all get a lot of use out of. And as you get some good success stories and some good experiences with it, please let me know. I'd love to share them out. We love to collect those for new product launches like this, especially when we're excited about it like we are the ConsoliDator Plus. So don't be a stranger. Let us know how they work out. And lastly, I'll close with one more request, that you fill out that survey when this seminar ends. I would certainly love to get some feedback from you both on this presentation in general, as well as other things you might like to see from Precision Digital. So with that, I wish you a good rest of your Wednesday. I hope it was well worth your time. I think that any of you who find a use for this will love this product, and I look forward to hearing about it. Thank you very much.